Francis Bacon is writing at a time of incredible political and religious turmoil and violence. So, what does he do as he makes his argument for a scientific exploration? Does he set religion aside? Does he incorporate religion? Does he ignore it? Take a look at the advancement of learning and how he forms a persuasive, elegant argument while managing religious objections to what he's trying to do. Okay, so we'll get right into advancement of learning, and our first job is to take a look at Bacon's opening. He deals with probably the strongest objection of his time against the gathering of knowledge and against observing nature, trying to get the secrets of nature, and some people thought the secrets of God's creation. And he's got to deal with these things first. And we're going to figure out whether what he's doing sounds fair, whether it's balanced, whether he is offering the other side enough credit and explaining his opponent's position fairly enough. Because if he didn't do that, that would be called straw man argument, right? As you know. And is he trolling them? Is he insulting them? Like these are all things we're kind of familiar with in today's atmosphere. And I have to remind all of you that Bacon in 1605 was living in a very um, violent and controversial atmosphere. We're in the middle of the Reformation. This is Protestants and Catholics fighting it out very often in violent ways. People are being burned at the stake. They just got through an administration before Queen Elizabeth where Protestants were being burned. Um, there's a political kind of controversy going on. Right after Bacon dies, there's going to be a civil war over taxes, and the king's going to get his head chopped off. This is not a peaceful time. And Bacon's right in the middle of all of this. And yet he writes a book, and it's up to you to decide, does he sound like fair, balanced, and reasonable and persuasive? So we'll take a look at the way he does it and see what happens. I'm going to start right where he ends the dedication to King James I. So this is it says Majesty here, Majesty. So King James I, as you may remember, is the King of England who engaged in the project to create a new translation of the Bible, which is now called the King James Bible. But this happens after this. So Bacon was not so wrong to think, wow, King James, as a very learned king, might really want to support this project to collect data and maybe make inventions or medical discoveries that can help mankind. So here, I'm not going to get deep into this, but here he talks about silence and interruption of tacit objections. What this really means is it's a very interesting way he opens up. He says, I could just go right ahead and talk about this institution I want to start. But then you would be thinking in your head, yeah, but isn't that kind of sinful? Or yeah, but aren't learned men kind of prejudiced and stay inside all day and are not very practical? You might be thinking all kinds of things. He says, I want to take care of your objections first. He says, I want to get rid of these tacit objections. In other words, things you're thinking in your head while I'm giving you my proposal. And he splits these up into three categories. One, here it says zeal and jealousy of divines. In other words, religious men are so zealous, in other words, so puritanical, that they're going to have things to say, right? Is this trolling? It's up to you. Or another group of objections is the severity of politiques. In other words, public opinion, stereotypes of guys like me who read too much, right? Even today, we have like the Big Bang Theory. I don't know if you know this TV show, and the way we even have a word, we even have this term nerd, right? So the idea is even then people said, oh, well, if you're reading books all day, how practical can you be? You don't have a balanced life, right? And then another category is the errors and imperfections of learned men themselves, right? Which is we also have obstacles in our own minds which keep us from learning new things. Or if we do discover something new, um, maybe we're not so likely to kind of admit when we're wrong because we might be too proud about what we discovered, right? So this is a whole other category. So there's three categories. The first is religious, the second is public opinion, and the third is obstacles within our own ways of thinking. So he says, let's deal with the first one, the religious one. He says, um, what religious people say is that gathering knowledge and observing the natural world and documenting that is aspiring to overmuch knowledge, which was the original temptation and sin, whereupon ensued the fall of man. So the idea here is that he imagines what religious people would say, certain religious people, and they would say, God did not want us to gain knowledge or look at the secrets of his creation, right? And notice the language here that Bacon is using. It's a very elegant language, aspiring to overmuch knowledge. It almost sounds like he's agreeing with them. And I wonder if we're doing that when we write our papers, our essays, when we make our dialogues, we have our dialogues. Do we give the other side really the credit they deserve, right? And really giving their argument the full elegance that it might have. Not only that, this is from Genesis in the Bible, right? The idea that man ate of the tree of knowledge and then was banished from the Eden, and we became mortal as the original sin. He actually goes to Solomon, which today we call Solomon, and he quotes another part of the Bible. He says that there is no end of making books. There's so many books, and that much reading is weariness of the flesh. In other words, even Solomon, the wise King Solomon says, if you read all day, you might be ignoring the more important things in life. So notice what Bacon is doing. He's not only giving the other side their first objection, which is from Genesis, the tree of knowledge. He's also quoting another part of the Bible, Ecclesiastes. And then he goes to St. Paul, which is the New Testament, the Christian part of the Bible. And so he's really giving the other side a lot of opportunity and a lot of credit, right? And I see if you agree with me. You can stop the video and just read this paragraph yourself. Now comes his answer to that. He goes, okay, let's go look at Genesis. Let's go look in the Bible and see, does God really say he doesn't want us to gather knowledge? And he goes, God is not against the pure knowledge of nature and universality. In other words, the earthly things and things in space. A knowledge by the light whereof man did give names unto the other creatures in paradise. Right? So God actually gave man this job to name all the creatures. Why would he give him this job if he didn't want him to learn about what the creatures look like, how they acted, and things like that? God does actually say there is a kind of knowledge I don't want you to have, but it's a different kind of knowledge. It's the proud knowledge of good and evil with an intent in man to give law unto himself and to depend no more on God's commandments. Yes, that's the kind of knowledge we don't want man to have, according to God. So if you do look at the Bible, and I just have a little excerpt here from the Geneva Bible, because as I said before, King James, um, you know, um, did create a Bible, did sponsor the creation of translation of a Bible. But here in the Geneva Bible, I'm not going to go deep into this. Here's the part where God says, don't eat of the tree of knowledge, otherwise you will become mortal. And here's the part where God said, um, I'm going to bring every beast of the field. And the key here is to see, and it's spelled S-E, and this weird old-fashioned S that looks like an F, to see how he would call them. So in other words, God doesn't say, this is the name of a cow. He says, let's see what you call it. In other words, you'll look at the cow or this creature, and then you'll name it. And whatsoever the name man named the living creature, so was the name thereof. Right. So whatever man named it, that's what the name was. Right. And this is before the Tower of Babel, when all the languages got divided up and they were mutually unintelligible and that kind of stuff. So notice that Bacon is not really saying you guys are wrong. He's saying, but this kind of knowledge, I agree, we should not be aiming for. And no matter what you personally might think, whether we should be examining ethics and what's good and evil, but Bacon is saying, look, guys, we know this is wrong. This is a sin. But let's set this to the side because God created another category of knowledge, the knowledge of the animals and birds, and eventually talking about plants as well. Now, think carefully about this. When you study biology, right, you study this like Latin system, right? Homo erectus, Homo sapien, right? And the names of all the animals and plants. These are categories. This is the very essence of science, is to categorize based on observations so that we can then make um, kind of laws and theories and observations and categories of all living things, right? And so it's actually the essence of science. And so Bacon is basically saying this is totally allowed. Not only that, but he actually makes another argument later on, which is kind of beautiful, if you agree, which is not only is it not a sin to investigate nature and look for the so-called secrets of nature, it's actually praising God even more because it's like, wow, look at the incredible intricacy of God's creation. Now, today, that's called creationism, and there's objections to that for other reasons. But I just want to focus on, is this argument fair? Is it persuasive to you? Do you think Bacon did a good job? Is he trolling a little bit? Notice he did say a couple words like ignorance and things like that. Or is it something that makes sense to you? And is this a good model for arguing? So in the next video, we're going to do this next group of objections that he's trying to deal with, and that's the objection of politics, as I said before, which is the public stereotypes of well, I was going to say nerds, of what he calls learned men. And he's going to deal with these objections, things like I don't know, if you stay all day reading books and stay inside all day, do you have physical fitness? Can you fight in a war? Can you serve your country? Things like that. All kinds of objections, some of them that we'll be familiar with, and some of them that are really of Bacon's time. So join me for that, and we'll just keep moving through this book and see what you think. Thank you for listening.